also be serving in that public capacity as a trustee for his alma mater. So thank you very much for your continued service. But again, just a great way to highlight our institutions and the opportunities that they certainly provide. So we are here to not only hear briefly about some of the opportunities that the state of California has engaged with this year, but also an opportunity to gather as a community here in Silicon Valley to recognize many of our community leaders, individuals who have served in a very public capacity, and I can't tell you how inspired I am by seeing them all sitting here today, and I think you'll also be equally as proud. So having said that, let's just get into just a few topics to discuss as we have accomplished this calendar year. As you may know, I travel from my home here in Campbell to go to Sacramento every Monday and come back on Thursdays to work for each and every one of you. So if there is an opportunity to hear from you, please do not hesitate to let me and or our team know, as we'll have additional opportunities throughout the year as you'll hear from upcoming events. So first off, let's talk climate change. The environment deserves a round of applause for all of the beating that it's received lately. As a resident here in Silicon Valley for over 35 years, born and raised here in this district, I recall how precious the environment was. In fact, I remember watching Captain Planet, a cartoon novel that we would used to see, and talking about the importance of recycling and reducing waste, and it really made an impact on us. But I think much of those key elements are not lost on us. And it's important that we are stewards of our environment. These wildfires are now our new norms, and it's critical that we advance the interest in ensuring that we're doing what we can to fight climate change. It's not by coincidence either that we've seen such devastating impacts to our communities. And we might say, well, Silicon Valley, we don't have such challenges here, and yet some of you may remember the Oakland fires, and or even just look up at the sky during these fires, and not only just visualize it, but physically being impacted by these wildfires. So again, what are we doing as a state to ensure that we are fighting this?
Log the forest.
Part of the notion also that the wildfires that we've seen this year was equivalent to the size of the state of Vermont. Just the scope and magnitude of what we're talking about is important to address. Over $675 million from the state of California was spent simply in just combating wildfires. Not just to say the impact of the over $12 billion of devastation, but the cost in tackling and combating these issues. And of course, many of our public servants, our men and women in uniform, go day in and day out with mutual aid from this region. And we are subsidizing and paying for these issues. So having the opportunity to tackle them are critically important. And again, I want to recognize the men and women in uniform who are joining us here today, including our very own fire chief who is here. Thank you very much for their continued effort and service that you do.
We're showing strong internet.
These issues also hit home, and I see a number of our men and women in uniform from our own Campbell Police Department. One of our former police chaplains, and a former planning commissioner, and a former Citizen of the Year was part of the Santa Rosa fires, and he also lost his home. Our community rallied for him and tried to do what we can. But this transcends geography, and we know that we must tackle these issues. So, what are we doing as the state of California? As you know, the United States withdrew, unfortunately, from the Paris Climate Agreement. As a result of that, we in the state of California, as the 5th largest economy in the world, want to take a different direction, ensuring that we support science and recognize that this is not only about the future, but for the present. That's why we passed a historic piece of legislation known as Senate Bill 100, which increases our renewable portfolios for the state of California up to 60%, and 100% of our electrical energy from renewable sources. Again, requiring 100% of our electrical energy coming from renewable sources. Now I'll tell you, since we've passed this piece of legislation, we have also been recipients of a number of different calls from other state legislators saying, what can we do to similarly emulate some of these different components? And by the way, this is not just an environmental issue. This was an issue that was supported by many in the business community, making sure that we can support business and climate change as a whole together. We will continue to do so, but leading the nation in that way. There was part of the major issues with respect to climate change. Let's move on to criminal justice reform. The state of California also passed a piece of legislation known as Senate Bill 10, which eliminated our cash bail system. We are the first state to do so. As some of you know, there is significant injustice in our judicial system, which is to say that if you get arrested and go through this process and you can afford to pay, you can be let out, known as posting bail. And if you do not have those type of resources, well, you're out of luck and you'll be imprisoned. So making sure that our justice system does not take into account that of socioeconomics and or that of which you were born in, we want to create parity and equality in our criminal justice system and ensuring that we have as much of a fair process as possible. And I'll say we continue to do so, and this was the first state in the nation to eliminate our cash bail system, and I'm hopeful that we will continue to look at additional reforms in our justice system to ensure that we have a judicial system that serves everybody. You know, one of the other pieces of legislation that I carried and that is currently sitting on the governor's desk was with respect to individuals. And we oftentimes talk about incarceration and individuals in the system and coming out of the system, recidivism. How do we set up individuals for that second chance and ensuring that we give them that opportunity? We also know about this issue about checking the box or that you have a felony. It becomes that much harder to find a job. Well, I think that we believe in second chances, and if the individual has gone through a system and paid their due diligence, their time, that we have an opportunity to provide them a second chance at life. This piece of legislation that is currently sitting on the governor's desk is Assembly Bill 2138 that prohibits the denial of licensure for non-violent convictions so that different individuals wishing to get licensed have an opportunity and that continued consideration for that balanced approach. Take into consideration one by one. Again, non-serious convictions, and again, the spirit of our American society. Next to technology and consumer protection. The state of California, we've seen, not only with respect to the environment, but with respect to consumer protection and people. With net neutrality and the Trump administration, we said we do not believe in such things. We want to ensure that we have net neutrality, which protects consumers.
You cut me off.
In California, we have passed a piece of legislation that is currently on the governor's desk to ensure that consumers are not subjugated to such corporate tax, and ensuring that you can stream and have an opportunity and that corporate interests do not get in the way of our fundamental access to information. Just very quickly too, we have a number of different new technologies and new things that we're trying to tackle that are very problematic for our democracy. What happens when you have the app economy that is innovating so quickly and yet we don't have the regulations in place? That is why we passed a piece of legislation that will require safety recalls on personal ride-sharing programs. There are many companies now in which you can share your vehicles. Should you be in this audience, for example, now, you can post on your app and say, I want to rent out my vehicle for a day or an hour, and individuals can do so. We want to ensure that we have those types of safety protections, and therefore have passed a bill to ensure that the same type of safety recalls on these vehicles should they be let out. How about with respect to cannabis? This piece of the issue of cannabis, as in the infinite wisdom of the electorate, just as a recollection, was passed by the voters. Voters passed a legalization of cannabis. It is our obligation, though, to make some necessary changes with respect to consumer protection. That's why I proposed a piece of legislation that is currently sitting on the governor's desk as well. He has about 15 days or more to sign these pieces of legislation. But it would prohibit dispensaries from sharing your data, if you are a consumer of cannabis, from third-party vendors without your consent. And we want to make sure that that does not go out without consent. Moving on to elections and the integrity of our elections. Just a quick story. I'm sure many of you can share this similar type of experience, but I was at Trader Joe's in a baseball cap and buying some groceries, and there was a petition gatherer outside that Trader Joe's. And I actually tried to not make eye contact, but so no such luck. And the individual said, "Do you want to stop the tyranny of the Sacramento politicians?" I said, "Actually, I'm all ears now. Please do tell." As the individual talked to me about getting my signature, I proceeded to ask questions. The conversation immediately ceased, and the individual, the petition gatherer, went to the other person. And part of the reason is because sometimes these petition gatherers are paid up to $10 a signature. And we know that that can be problematic, because if they're incentivized for signature, they do not have to have a robust conversation and dialogue with you. And unfortunately, so much of our democracy has been abused. In fact, this initiative process was never meant to be used by these special moneyed interests, but rather by a citizens' engagement, a grassroots effort. Unfortunately, it's been 30 plus years since it's just solely been a citizens-led effort. As I've mentioned to you before, 2 years ago, we had 17 propositions. If you lived in the city and county of San Francisco, you had 17 statewide propositions. You had 25 local propositions, in addition to your local offices. This year, we have 11 on the ballot that I know many of you are very well informed on, and the voter information guide is oftentimes very complicated, to which I would suggest to you it is even difficult for me to understand and to be able to read. Therein lies the opportunity to make sure that we want to maintain the integrity of our electoral process and get rid of paid signature gatherers, so that we do not have a system in place in which these special interests continue to abuse the system, and or additional disclosures on these areas. So these are the things that we are focused on. I'll also tell you that there was a very grassroots process with respect to our laws and how petitions work. Last year, during our open house, Council member Paul Resnikoff at the time said, "Does it really work? We have something called a bill trimming process, in which you could put a bill idea on a tree." And he said, "Is that real? Would you really consider a bill idea that I have?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, "What is the bill? What is the concept?" Well, here in the city of Campbell, passed an ordinance that says we do not allow dispensaries, local control. We will not allow cannabis dispensaries in the city of Campbell. Unfortunately, there were individuals within the cannabis industry who said, "Well, we want to go a different direction. We want to collect signatures in the city of Campbell and place something on the ballot for us to allow for cannabis to be distributed in the city of Campbell." As a result, the city of Campbell and public taxpayer dollars spent close to $1 million to put this standalone special election on the ballot. This initiative failed with no foreseeable benefit to public good. And I'll tell you, when I served on the city council, I remember arguing with fellow council members over $5,000 on pavements and other areas. But $1 million, that's a really difficult pill to swallow, particularly for a small community. So I share that with you so that we can be a much more informed electorate. And I oftentimes ask myself, there was this initiative that actually qualified to split California into 3 territories. And I said, gosh, do fellow Californians really believe that's what they're signing? He said, "Hi, would you please, getting your broccoli, would you please sign the initiative to split California into 3 territories?" I don't don't know. So again, with the process to use us as accountability and our democratic process, that is that of our state legislative process. Moving on to something that's near and dear to my heart with respect to LGBT rights. In 2012, the state of California passed a piece of legislation that would ban conversion therapy for minors 18 and under. This notion of conversion therapy is such that you can be changed. Your sexual orientation can be changed. This has been debunked by the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, Marriage and Family Therapists, a number of widely respected medical groups. Since 2012, 15 other states have also passed similar legislation. As a result, this year, we've introduced legislation to qualify it as a fraudulent practice. Under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, to just call it what it is, fraud. And I will say that it is also taken with great respect that I am aware that there are some other communities who may still believe in that. But under this piece of legislation, you can still practice conversion therapy so long as that is not a financial transaction. So that's why we want to make it very narrow in scope to ensure that we have the protections in place, but allow for our democracy to still occur. That piece of legislation was received bipartisan support, and currently we will look to introduce it in the very near future. So keep apprised of that. Is something that I think is near and dear to my heart, and ensuring that we stand as a community that is inclusive and celebrates all people. This other issue, moving on to public safety, the opioid crisis. Did you know that there were enough opioids prescribed for every man, woman, and child around the clock for every Californian for an entire month in the state of California? This is something that we want to address, and it's a challenging issue to tackle. But there are some simple things that we can do. The state of California, previously, until legislation was signed that we passed, interstate database sharing. In other words, to prevent doctor shopping. Individuals could go to Nevada, get their prescriptions, and then cross the borders to California and get their prescriptions filled without the prescriber knowing that this prescription has already been given to this individual. So using basic technology and the things that we already have, just on the small things that we can do, are very important. We also had a bill that was signed that put serial numbers on prescription pads on the prescribers. Oftentimes these prescription pads would get into the black market, and we were not able to track them. With these serial numbers, now law enforcement can actually track down the serial pads and find out where the source is coming from to prevent further victimization and abuse. But I'll tell you, it is not just a stigma and an issue that is focused in rural California, but in places all over. And I am proud that we can continue to tackle this issue, but we have a lot more work to do, and I very much would welcome your input to ensuring that we can continually protect individuals in the state. Just a few more issues, and then we'll get into some of our community events. I also have a bill on the governor's desk, which is Assembly Bill 1968. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jorge Wong, who was former president of the California Psychological Association. He currently practices as a psychologist at Asian Americans for Community Involvement. There was a Campbell resident who was placed on a 5150 hold twice 1 year, which is to that of an individual who has been deemed not to be stable. This piece of legislation says that if you are placed on a 5150 hold twice in 1 year, you are prohibited from life from owning a firearm because of fear of harm to yourself and harm to the community.
Ooh.
You can still petition a judge.
Unbelievable. By mere law, you can eliminate a constitutional right?
Petition a judge to allow for the opportunity to see if this individual should be able to possess a firearm. When I told you that story about Dr. Jorge Wong, in which he testified in Sacramento and said there was an individual who shot herself because she was placed twice in 1 year on two 5150 holds. So not only is this for the community, but for the individuals themselves. And again, in California, we want to make sure that we have a safe space for everyone.
A safe or communist space? How can you eliminate a constitutional right with a law? Or if you don't agree with the guy politically.
Infrastructure, I know a very sexy topic for all of us, but nonetheless a very important one. And I know all of you care deeply, equally about housing, the issues of housing and the issues of our roads. Look, nothing is going to be solved overnight, and given how we do planning with respect to local jurisdictions, these times take years and oftentimes decades. But with the state of California, we have focused on a number of different initiatives which allows and empowers local jurisdictions to continue to build. And that's why, for example, in the city of Cupertino, the dilapidated Valco project will be built with hundreds upon hundreds of affordable housing units to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place in accordance with jobs. Now just think about that for one moment with respect to the city of Cupertino. The most valuable company in the world, that of Apple Computer, has built its spaceship, and we are proud of that. At the same time, we need to make sure that we have a balanced approach to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place. That is where we need to further advance the things that we care about and making sure that we have the roadways and, by the way, that the corporations are paying their fair share for the public benefit that is being used by the profits that are being generated alike. So, for what I consider the fun part, if I can kindly call up the mayor for the city of Campbell, Mayor Paul Resnikoff, our Los Gatos former mayor and current council member, Mariko Sayok, San Jose council member Deb Davis, Montserrat Mayor Burton Craig, Saratoga Mayor Marilyn Bernal, and we have a staff member also for the city of Cupertino. So this year, tax revenues in the state of California have not been touched or changed within 20 years. But this year, with bipartisan support, both Republicans and Democrats, we were able to pass a bill with respect to transportation funding, a much sorely needed revenue stream that frankly is difficult for the political establishment to support. But as a direct result, these resources will not be used for any other issue other than transportation and goes directly to our local communities. And so,
are you guys not engaging your brains? You're just throwing away your rights. That's amazing.
So for the city of Campbell, each year, the state of California,
wow,
$250,000 for our city of Campbell. And from the city of San Jose, we have Councilmember Sergio Jimenez and Councilmember Deb Davis. A whopping $6 million for the state every single year. And I know these will be good stewards of our public trust because this is all of our public taxpayer dollars at work. To the town of Los Gatos, $220,000. city of Monte Sereno, a whopping $16,000. Please count about how much the residents make in one day. To the city of Cupertino, $271,000. And to our lovely city of Saratoga, $178,000. Again, our public officials, your public servants will continually be here. These are our representatives, and I know that they are very accessible, so should you have any interest in understanding where these dedicated resources are going to this specific project in their local communities, I know that they'll be delighted to share with you. So again, to our public officials, thank you very much. Finally now, before the exciting part of our community awards, there are some upcoming events that I wanted to share with you because this forum does not necessarily allow for a one-on-one dialogue, so I very much welcome an opportunity to talk to you. So, the first event, we have boba and bills. If you like tea and boba, we can talk and share some tea and have an opportunity to talk to you there about any bill ideas or any other things and challenges that you might have, D&D or anything else. Senior Scam Stopper, there are a number of scams that are victimizing a lot of our seniors, and I'm sure many of you have been recipients of mail or fraudulent attacks, but we have a number of different agencies, including the Postal Service, to talk to you about how to verify whether or not this is real or not. So it's not just for seniors, it's for everyone as well. And then a holiday open house, to which I mentioned to you that we have an open house for the district office that serves each and every one of you. And if you have bill ideas, we have a tree trimming opportunity there as well. So additional opportunities to be engaged. Okay, now to our community awards. If you are here to support these individuals, I know that you'll join us in recognizing our wonderful community members. First up, I would like to bring up Mayor Burton Craig from the city of Monte Sereno to introduce our next awardee, and that is none other than our Chancellor, George Blumenthal, who is UC Santa Cruz's 10th Chancellor and has been a proud banana slug for over a whopping 40 years.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of introducing George R. Blumenthal, who is the UC Santa Cruz's 10th Chancellor. He joined the campus in 1972 as a faculty member in the astronomy and astrophysics area, and he was named Chancellor on September 19, 2007, after serving as an interim Chancellor for 14 months. Mr. Blumenthal's appointment as Chancellor followed many years as a distinguished professor, researcher, and campus leader, and theoretical astrophysicist. Chancellor Blumenthal made path-breaking contributions to our understanding of the origin of the structure of the universe, including galaxies and clusters of galaxies, and to the role that dark matter plays in the formation and evolution of this structure. He is co-author of 2 textbooks, 21st Century Astronomy and Understanding Our Universe. Chancellor Blumenthal serves widely on many government boards, including Vice Chair of the California Association for Research in Astronomy, which oversees the WM Keck Observatory on the summit of Mauna Kea, Hawaii. In 2017, he was appointed to a seat on the governing board of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, and he is also a member of the joint venture Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley Leadership Boards. He earned his bachelor's degree at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee